The winter of 1944, the Apennine Mountains, Italy. Auntie's front silence was not golden. It was suspicious. It was terrifying. The war on the Gothic Line was a war of sound. Men's lives were governed by what they heard. They lived in a state of agonizing, heightened alert, their ears straining in the frozen pre-dawn darkness. They listened for the click of a rifle bolt being pulled back, the crunch of a boot on frozen snow, the snip of wire cutters, or, worst of all, the sudden, tearing canvas rip of the German MG, the Lordinia, opening up from a new, unexpected position. In this war of sound, the most valuable prize was surprise, and the Brazilian Expeditionary Force was planning its biggest, most important attack yet. The final push to take the stronghold of Monticus. The entire operation, involving thousands of men, artillery barrages, and coordinated movements, depended on a single, crucial first step, and that step was predicated on absolute, total silence. Here was the problem: a single German MG-42 Ness. It wasn't in the main line of defense. It was a forward observation post, a tripwire, pushed out into a patch of dense, dark woods on the flank of the main Brazilian assault route. This nest wasn't just a gun. It was an alarm bell. Its job was not to hold the line, but to fire a single, long burst the moment it saw the first Brazilian move. That one burst, echoing through the valleys, would be the signal. It would alert the entire German defensive line. It would tell the German artillery, hidden miles away, exactly where to fire. The main Brazilian attack would be forced to advance directly into a perfectly ranged wall of fire. The attack was doomed before it began, unless that nest could be silenced. But how? The Brazilians faced a tactical nightmare. You couldn't use artillery. The sound of the shells landing would be the alarm. You couldn't use mortar. The thump of the launch tube would be the alarm. You couldn't even use a standard infantry assault, a fire and maneuver with grenades and rifles. The sound of the firefight, no matter how brief, would be the alarm. The mission was a contradiction in terms. The nest had to be destroyed, but it had to be destroyed without a sound. The platoon lieutenant, a young officer from Rio, brought his sergeants into his dugout. He laid out the map. "Aqui," he said, pointing. "This is the problem. We have to make it go away." Silently, the sergeants stared. The approach to the nest was itself a trap. It was a 300-meter stretch of dense, ancient Italian forest. The Germans had been there for months. They had turned the woods into a wall of noise. They had strung tripwires connected to tin cans filled with rocks. They had scattered broken glass and dry branches on every conceivable path. They had booby-trapped the entire area. It was impossible to walk through, let alone crawl through, without sounding like a herd of cattle. A standard American-trained patrol had already tried. They were good soldiers. They used their standard-issue bayonets and K-bar knives to try and cut a path. But the American knives were fighting tools, pig stickers. They were not clearing tools. The patrol was heard. 2 men were killed by machine gun fire. The rest forced to retreat. The mission was declared impossible. The lieutenant looked at his NCOs. "The attack is at 0500. We have 6 hours. Tell me how we do this." A long, heavy silence filled the dugout. And then a quiet voice came from the back. "Eu posso ir. I can go." It was a CIBO, a corporal. "We will Kalim Matuz." Matuz was not from Rio de Janeiro or São Paulo. He was a homem do Matu, a man of the forest. He was from the deep, uncharted interior of the Mata Atlantica, in Bahia, or perhaps even the Amazon. He was a matiro, a woodsman, a hunter. He had grown up in a world so dense with vegetation, it made these Italian woods look like a city park. His entire life, his primary tool was not a rifle. It was not a bayonet. It was a facão, a machete. The other soldiers looked at him. Matus was quiet, small, with indigenous features and eyes that seemed to see everything. He was known as a superb tracker, but he was not considered a hard charger. The lieutenant sighed. "CIBO Matus, we already tried. Knives are too loud." They snapped the branches. "Sim, tenant," Matus said, his voice soft, respectful. Facão é diferente. The machete is different." He reached to his pack and pulled out his own. It was not a standard-issue militarily blade. It was his personal tool, brought from home. It was long, weighted perfectly at the tip, and sharpened to a razor's edge. "O tenente," he explained, "está pensando em cortar." "You are thinking of chopping." He shook his head. "Chopping makes noise. I snap. O facão, ele não corta. El faça. The machete. It doesn't chop, it slices. He held up his hand. O som do facão, he whispered. H é o som do vento. O som da chuva. Não é o som de um homem. The sound of the machete is she. It's the sound of the wind, the sound of rain. It is not the sound of a man. Matos looked at the map. O problema não é o barulho, o problema é a pressa. Os americanos, eles se movem rápido, eles quebram as coisas. Eu não quebro, eu dobro, eu afasto. E o que eu não posso afastar? E faixo. The problem isn't the noise, the problem is the hurry. The Americans .ti move fast, they break things. I do not break. I bend, I push aside, and what I cannot push aside, I slice. This was the jungle machete tactic. It was not a tactic of violence. It was a tactic of patience. It was the wisdom of the jaguar, not the charge of the bull. It was a level of fieldcraft so advanced, it was simply invisible to the American-trained officers. The lieutenant, desperate, saw the absolute confidence in the corporal's eyes. Who do you need, Matos? Ninguém, Matos replied. Nobody. Só meu facão. E tempo. Just my machete. And time. The lieutenant, seeing the absolute, unshakable certainty in the corporal's eyes, made the most difficult decision of his career. He would defy his own training. He would trust the Matero. Go, he whispered. Deus te acompanhe. Si abio. God be with you, Corporal. Matus simply nodded. He didn't load himself with grenades. He didn't take extra ammunition. He left his heavy pack, his helmet, even his M1 rifle, which was too long, too clumsy. He was not a soldier going to war. He was a hunter. He took 3 things: his pistol, holstered and wrapped in a rag to keep it from rattling, a small, sharp fighting knife, and his facon. He checked its edge one last time. It was perfect. He might have even wiped the blade with a bit of oil, not to lubricate it, but to darken it, to ensure no stray glint of moonlight would betray him. He stepped out of the dugout, a shadow moving into other shadows. The time was 0100. He had 4 hours, 300 meters. The math was horrifying. He would be moving at an average of just over 1 meter per minute. This was not a patrol. This was a form of agonizing, suspended animation. He reached the edge of the woods. The wall of noise, the place where the American patrol had failed. He could see the evidence. A piece of American-issued tripwire, cut and discarded. A dark stain in the snow that he knew was frozen blood. The Americans had tried to go through it. They had moved like soldiers, breaching an obstacle. Matus moved like a He got on his belly. The snow was crusted with ice, on top of a bed of frozen mud. He began to crawl. Not a military crawl, pushing with his knees and elbows. That was too fast, too loud. He moved like a snake. He used his toes, his stomach, his chest, sliding himself forward, inches at a time. His facao held out in front of him, not as a weapon, but as a sensor. His left ungloved would pat the ground. Gently, gently. His right hand, holding the machete, would sweep just above the snow. The flat of the heavy blade was his probe. He felt it connect with something. Ting, a wire. A tripwire, strung low, connected to a cluster of tin cans filled with pebbles. The American patrol would have tried to cut it. The snip of wire cutters, in the dead calm of 0:30, would sound like a rifle shot. Matos didn't cut it. A studied Italiano. He saw it was strung about 6 inches off the ground. He had a choice. Go over or go under. Going over was faster, but his clothing might snag. Going under was slower, safer. He chose under. He pressed his entire body flat into the frozen mud. He exhaled, making himself thinner. He began to slide on his chest underneath the wire. It was an agonizing process. The ice-crusted mud was like sandpaper on his uniform. He could feel the wire just above his back, a single, taut thread of death. He moved 1 inch, paused, listened. The only sound was the pounding of his own heart. He moved another inch, paused, listened. It took him 5 full minutes to clear that single wire. E continued deeper into the woods. The trees were thicker here. The ground was a carpet of dry, brittle branches and leaves, frozen solid and layered under the snow. This was the real trap. This was the snap that had killed the last patrol. Matus stopped. He could not crawl here. He had to stand. He rose to a low crouch, balanced on the balls of his feet. He was now a jaguar, not a snake. He took a step. His boot hovered over a patch of snow. He didn't just step on it, he tested it, pressing down slowly, feeling for the crunch of a hidden branch. He felt one. He stopped. He reversed his fako, holding it by the blade. He used the heavy wooden handle to tap the snow, gently, crushing the frozen branch under the snow before it could snap. He was silencing the path before he walked on it. He encountered a larger obstacle, a low-hanging pine branch, thick with dry, dead needles. It blocked the path. To go around it would take him to close to a moonlit clearing. He had to go through it. The Americans would have put their shoulder down and pushed, or tried to cut it with their K-bar. Snap. Matos looked at the branch. He raised his and dislisted. It was not a chop. It was not a hack. It was a slow, deliberate, whisper-quiet draw of the razor-sharp blade. The sound was not crack. The sound was SSSHHHHH. The sound of the wind. The sound of rain. The branch, severed, did not fall. He caught it with his free hand. He didn't drop it. He placed it, silently, on a soft bank of snow. He moved on. 100 meters down. It had taken him over an hour. He was freezing. The cold was a physical weight, a monster trying to make him rush. To rush was to make noise. To make noise was to die. He controlled his breathing. He did not think about the cold. He did not think about the Germans. He thought only about the next step. His world was reduced to the 3 feet in front of him. He found the glass. The Germans had shattered a wine bottle on a narrow deer track. He saw the glint of it in the moonlight. This was the trap that had wounded the American. Matus didn't try to clear it. He simply avoided it. He stepped off the path into the deeper, softer snow, sinking to his knees. It was harder. It was colder, but it was silent. He was a ghost. He was not a soldier. He was a force of nature. He was the motto itself, reclaiming the forest. He used the trees for cover, moving from shadow to shadow, his body a part of the darkness. After what felt like an eternity perhaps, 3.5 hours of this agonizing, meticulous, frozen movement, he saw it. The trees thinned. He was at the edge of a small, man-made clearing. He lay flat, his heart a cold drum. E had done Italiano. He had crossed 300 meters of D-wall of noise, and he had not made a single sound. He was 20 meters from the objective. He could see it. A dugout reinforced with logs. A heavy sand-colored tarpaulin was draped over the top for camouflage. He could see the black, evil snout of the MG-42 pointing back toward the Brazilian lines. And he saw movement. A single German sentry, bundled in a thick greatcoat, stamping his feet in the snow, trying to stay warm. He was smoking a cigarette, the tiny, red cherry, a beacon in the dark. He was bored. He was cold. And he was completely, blissfully, unaware that 20 meters away, a ghost from the Brazilian jungle was watching him, holding a razor-sharp blade. The alarm bell was still silent, and the hunter was in position. The time was now 4 a.m. The dead hour, 1 hour until the main attack. Matus lay in the snow, 20 meters from the nest, perfectly still. He was no longer a man. He was a piece of the frozen landscape. The cold was a physical, agonizing weight, trying to force his muscles to shake, to cramp. To shake was to make noise. To make noise was to die. He controlled his breathing, slowing his heart, entering the hunter's trance he had known his entire life. He did not feel the cold. He used it. The cold made the German sentry deaf, his ears muffled by a thick wool cap. The cold made him predictable. Matus watched the sentry. The German was a dark shape, pacing a 3-meter beat. Stamp his feet for 5 seconds. Pace left, peered into the darkness. Pace right, blow into his hands. He was miserable. Was cold. He was thinking of hot coffee, of Easter leaf, of anywhere but this frozen hole. He was not thinking about a Brazilian jungle hunter 20 meters away. A good hunter does not hunt the animal. He hunts the pattern. And the German's pattern was now as predictable as a clock. Matus waited. He let another 15 minutes pass. He let the German fall deeper into his cold, miserable routine. Then the moment came. The sentry paced to the far end of his beat, his back to Matus. He stopped to light another cigarette, his hands cupped, his head down, his world reduced to the tiny, glowing ember. Matus moved. He did not stand. He did not run. He flowed. He rose from the snow in a single, silent, low-crouched movement. He covered the 20 meters, not in a charge, but in a series of perfectly balanced, silent steps. His feet, finding the soft snow he had scouted with his eyes, The German was still fumbling with his cigarette. He had no idea Matus was on him. He was a ghost. His left hand clamped over the German's mouth, stifling the scream, jerking his head back. His right hand, holding his fighting knife, not to fack, or performed its own brutal, efficient logic. It was fast. It was precise. It was utterly silent. The German's body convulsed, a single, violent shudder. Matus held him, bearing his full weight, controlling the fall. He did not let him drop. He did not let his rifle clatter on the rocks. He lowered the body gently into a snowdrift, as if putting a child to bed. The cigarette fell, hissing, into the snow. The first alarm was safe. Silence. Matus froze, listening. He was now in the shadow of the dugout itself. He listened for any sound from within. A voice, a question. Hans bist du? De Hans, are you there? He heard ... snoring. A low, guttural, rhythmic sound. At least one man, maybe two. They were asleep. They were warm. They trusted their sentry. Matus had his opening. He scanned the dugout. The entrance was a dark, rectangular hole, covered by a hanging blanket. To go through the front was suicide. It was the funnel. The funnel. It could be booby trap. It was the expected point of entry. A hunter never uses the expected path. He looked at the roof. It was a low-mounded shape, covered in the heavy, German-issue tarpaulin, which was itself covered in a layer of camouflaging snow. Matus, moving with infinite care, crawled onto the roof. It was barely a foot above his head. He lay flat, pressing his ear to the frozen canvas. He listened. The snoring was louder now. He could hear two distinct breathing patterns. Two men asleep. Now, the Fakun. This was the moment. This was the hack. A knife was too small. It would get stuck. It would make him fight the tough, frozen canvas. A bayonet was a stabbing tool, but the Fako, the machete, was a slicing tool. It had weight. It had a long, curved belly. It was designed for this. He unsheathed it. The sound of the blade leaving the leather scabbard was a faint sheeing that seemed deafening in the silence. He froze. He waited. The snoring continued. He positioned himself. He would not chop. He would not hack. He would slice. He placed the razor-sharp tip of the fakao onto the tarpaulin. He held the handle with both hands. His body braced. And pulled. It was not a sound of violence. It was the sound he had known his whole life. Shashak, a long, whispering, tearing sound, like heavy silk ripping. It was the sound of the jungle. It was the sound of the wind in the palms. It was a sound the sleeping Germans, if they heard it at all, would have mistaken for a gust of wind over the canvas. He made one long, 3-foot slice, then another, perpendicular to it, in an L shape. A new door, a silent door. His door. He did not hesitate. He was not an infantryman, waiting for the order to breach. He was a predator. He peeled back the heavy, frozen flap of canvas. A faint, foul smell of unwashed bodies, stale cigarette smoke, and schnapps hit his face. He saw them, two dark shapes in the blackness, bundled in heavy greatcoats, asleep in their bunks. Their rifles were leaned against the far wall, just out of reach. Matus dropped. He didn't climb down. He dropped, silent as a jaguar, onto the dirt floor between the two bunks. His knees bent, absorbing the impact. He was in. The two sleeping forms stirred. One of them, perhaps sensing the sudden rush of cold air, mumbled in his sleep, his hand twitching. It was too late. Matus was already moving. His fakao was not the right tool for this. This was close, wet work. He dropped the fakao and drew his fighting knife. He went to the first bunk. It was a single, precise, brutal, and silent motion. No time to scream, no time to walk. He turned to the second man. The man's eyes, sensing the movement in the dark, had just begun to open. He saw a shadow, a shape, lunging at him. His mouth opened to yell. Matus's left hand clamped over his mouth, the same way he had taken the sentry. The knife did its work. It was over. The entire action, from slicing the roof to the second kill, had taken less than 10 seconds. Matus stood in the pitch blackness of the bunker, his chest heaving, his body supercharged with adrenaline. He listened. The only sound was the wind outside and the dripping of his own blade onto the dirt floor. Silence. Absolute, perfect, cold silence. He had done it He had taken a 3-man machine gun nest, a fortified alarm bell, and he had turned it off. He had neutralized it completely, without a single gunshot, without a single shout. The main Brazilian attack, the attack that depended on surprise, was now safe. He walked to the dugout entrance and looked out. The snow was still pale in the moonlight. He picked up his facon, wiped the blade on the uniform of a dead German, and sheathed it. His mission was complete. Now he just had to wait for the dawn and for the thunder of his own army to begin. Matus stood in the absolute cold blackness of the German dugout. The silence was profound, broken only by the drip of his knife and the heavy, slow thump, thump, dot, dot, thump of his own blood in his ears. A had done Italiano. He was 300 meters behind enemy lines, inside their fortification, and no one in the entire German army knew he was there. His mission was complete. The alarm bell was silenced, but now a new, cold reality set in. He was trapped. He could not go back the way he came. To cross that 300-meter wall of noise again before dawn was impossible. And dawn was coming. The main Brazilian attack was scheduled for 0500. It was now for 30. He was stuck. He was a ghost in the machine, and the machine was about to be turned on. He did the only thing a hunter could do. He waited. He found the deepest, darkest corner of the dugout, sat down next to the cold bodies of the men he had killed, and became part of the shadow. He was invisible, a silent observer, waiting for his own army to open fire. At 4:59, a single green flare arched into the sky from the Brazilian lines. The signal. At 5 o'clock, the world ended. A sound so vast, it was no longer sound, but a physical pressure, a rolling wave of thunder that shook the mountains. The entire combined artillery of the Brazilian and American forces, hundreds of guns, all opened fire at once. The preparatory barrage. Shells screamed overhead, smashing into the main German positions on Monte Castello, a kilometer behind Matus. The ground heaved. The log roof of the dugout groaned, dirt and ice raining down on him. And then he heard the whistles, faint but clear. The Brazilian infantry was advancing. Far below, the platoon lieutenant, the one who had authorized Matus's impossible mission, blew his own whistle. Mover. He led his men out of their trenches, their hearts in their throats. They were the lead assault element. Their path took them directly past the kill zone of the MG-42 nest that Matus was now occupying. The lieutenant was running on pure, terrified faith. He had no way of knowing if Matus had succeeded. He had heard no gunfire, no screams, no explosions. The silence from that nest was, in its own way, more terrifying than an ambush. Did Matus fail? Was he dead? Or was the German gunner simply waiting, his finger on the trigger, letting the Brazilians get closer before annihilating them? The platoon charged. They were running, hunched over, through the snow, their bayonets fixed. They hit the 100-meter mark, the edge of the kill zone. Every man braced for the sound. The rip, the tearing canvas of the Ladinha that would cut them to pieces. The lieutenant screamed, Agora, now, and ... Nothing. Only the distant, rolling thunder of the main artillery barrage. Only the sound of their own boots crunching in the snow. They ran past the nest. They were in the open, completely exposed, and the gun that should have killed them all remained silent. The lieutenant, in a state of stunned disbelief, didn't stop. He led his men forward, up the slope, toward their main objective, screaming with a mixture of terror and savage joy. They were alive. The ghost had done his work. The alarm bell had never rung. The main attack, thanks to 300 meters of silent crawling in a single, well-placed blade, had achieved total, complete surprise on its flank. Hours later, after the main objective was taken, after the sun was high and the battle had moved on, the lieutenant and 2 of his men went back. They approached the silent MG-42 nest, their rifles still raised. Cautious, they found the sentry, frozen in the snowdrift, his throat cut. They found the dugout. The lieutenant, his pistol in his hand, kicked open the blanket door. The scene inside was one of cold, precise, almost surgical violence. The 2 Germans were in their bunks, killed in their sleep, and in the far corner, sitting calmly, cleaning his bloody facao with a rag, was Ciabou Matus. He looked up as the lieutenant entered, his eyes showing no emotion. He simply nodded. Bom dia, meu tenente. O café está vindo. "Good morning, Lieutenant. Is the coffee coming?" The lieutenant just stared. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the silent MG-42. He looked at the roof, and he saw the slice. He saw the neat L-shaped cut in the tarpaulin, a door that no German had built. He finally understood. Matus hadn't just been lucky. He hadn't just been quiet. He had changed the architecture. He had used the logic of the jungle, not the logic of the army. How could the lieutenant report this? This act was, like the others, invisible. The official report would be simple. Flanking MG Nestad Grid 4 Alpha was found to be neutralized. Enemy Kia. Assault proceeded with element of surprise. It would imply artillery or a standard patrol. It would never could not see Siabo Matos, armed with a machete, spent 3 hours crawling, silently killed 3 men, and then waited in the bunker for the attack to start. It was too unbelievable. It was too personal. It was too savage. It wasn't war, as the manuals described it. It was hunting. Matus's hack wasn't a piece of technology. It was a method, an ancient, ancestral skill set, passed down from the Materos and the indigenous hunters of Brazil. It was a skill set that the American and German armies, with all their technology and all their rigid doctrine, had no counter for. This was the jungle machete tactic. It wasn't about the blade itself, it was about the philosophy of the blade. The American K-bar was a fighting knife. The German bayonet was a stabbing tool. The Brazilian faco in Matus's hands was a clearing tool, a slicing tool, a silent tool. He had used it not to fight, but to avoid a fight. He had used it to create a silent path, and then a silent door, to achieve a silent victory, ensuring the real battle, the main attack, could be won. It was the ultimate expression of the Jitanho, a hack of the very environment itself. And so, the legend of Siabio Matus's silent raid vanished almost as quickly as it happened. It was never written down. It was never studied. It became another Caso, a tall tale, told by the men of that platoon, a story that grew more unbelievable with each telling, until it settled into the realm of battlefield mythology. Remember that Kabak, the one who crawled into the German nest and killed them all with a It sounded like a ghost story, not a military debrief. The hack was too personal, too specific to the man himself. You cannot train an entire army to move like a jaguar. You cannot write a field manual for the instincts of a jungle hunter. Doctrine is built on replication, on the idea that any trained soldier can perform a task. Matus's feat was the opposite. It was a masterpiece of individual, unteachable artistry. As a result, it had no place in the official history of the war. It was an anomaly, an outlier, a brilliant, bloody exception that defied When the Gothic line finally crumbled, and the war spilled out into the open Po Valley, the specific skills of the Matero became less critical. The war became one of tanks, jeeps, and open field maneuvers. The jungle machete tactic, a perfect solution for a specific, silent, forested problem, was no longer needed. The war's end was a race, not a crawl. Just a few weeks later, the war in Italy was over. The guns fell silent. Matus, the quiet hunter, along with the rest of the Feb, waited for the long journey home. He was no longer a ghost in the Apennine snow. He was just a soldier, waiting for a ship. He packed his bag, he packed his standard issue gear, and, we can be sure, he packed his faco, the heavy, curved blade, carefully oiled and sheathed, its secret safe with him. He returned to Brazil. He landed in Rio, handed in his rifle, his helmet, his uniform. He received his discharge papers, and his final pay. He was no longer Siabio Matus, hero of the silent flank. He was just Matus again, a civilian, a man from the deep interior. He didn't seek out medals, he didn't ask for recognition, he simply went home. He took a bus, and then another, and then perhaps a boat, and finally walked, disappearing back into the deep, green, humid world he had come from. Back to Bahia or Tiarmason. Back to the Mata Atlantica. He went back to his old life. He put his faco back to its original work, clearing paths, harvesting crops, hunting. He went back to a world where the sounds he heard were not artillery, but the call of monkeys. Not the rip of an MG-42, but the SSSHHHK of his own blade, clearing a trail. He lived a long, quiet, anonymous life. His neighbors knew him as Matus, the quiet man, the caboclo who knew the forest better than any man alive, the man who could walk through the densest jungle without making a sound, the man you wanted with you when you went hunting. They saw his skill, but they had no concept of its true, terrible application. Perhaps decades later, as an old man, he might have told his grandchildren a story of a time he went hunting, far away, in a place where the mountains were covered in snow. A story of how he had to be very, very quiet to hunt the ... that were threatening his friends. He might have shown them his facco, its blade old and dark, but still. His grandchildren would have listened wide-eyed. Of a story, a hunting tale, they couldn't possibly understand. They couldn't know that their quiet, gentle grandfather, who taught them how to find fruit in the forest, had once used that same blade to drop from a roof and kill 3 men in their sleep. They couldn't know that for one single, terrifying night, this quiet Matero had become one of the most effective and lethal soldiers on the entire Italian front. Matusa's name is not on any monument. His jungle machete tactic is not in any textbook. It was a perfect, brutal, and silent act of Gitigno, a hack of the very environment itself. It was a story of a man whose ancient, civilian skills were, for one crucial moment, more advanced and more effective than any piece of modern military technology. He didn't use a better gun. He didn't have a better radio. He simply was a better predator. He proved that to win a war, you don't always need a louder explosion. Sometimes, you just need a sharper blade and the patience to know exactly when and where to slice.